Dr. Ethan Vale had always thought his work would take him to the farthest reaches of space, but he had never imagined it would lead him to the palace of an alien queen. When the summons arrived, it came as a formal message, written in perfect human language, yet embossed with symbols that seemed to shimmer slightly, as if alive. He had read about the Lumari in textbooks and research journals. They were known across the galaxy as highly intelligent, peaceful, and deeply curious about other species. Still, an invitation from the Queen herself was unprecedented. Ethan adjusted his glasses as he read the final line of the message. Your understanding of other species makes you uniquely suited for a test of connection. Come prepared to engage the heart, not the mind. He frowned, unsure what that meant. Tests of diplomacy, yes. Scientific collaboration, certainly. But a test of the heart? That was new. The shuttle ride from the human station to the Lumari orbital palace was unlike anything Ethan had experienced. The corridors curved in ways that defied conventional architecture. Windows revealed floating gardens suspended in zero gravity, with streams of light twisting around bioluminescent trees. The air shimmered faintly, almost as if it carried the music of the stars. Ethan felt both excited and anxious. He had trained his whole life to understand alien biology and psychology, but this felt different. This test seemed personal, almost intimate. When the shuttle docked, Ethan was greeted by attendants whose features were humanoid yet subtly alien. Their eyes were larger, their skin bore faint luminescent patterns, and they moved with a fluid grace that humans could hardly imitate. They led him silently through long hallways that seemed to hum with life. At the end, two enormous doors opened into a hall of soft glowing light, and there she was. Queen Leora was taller than Ethan expected. Her skin shone like polished pearl, and delicate patterns of light traced across her arms and face, pulsing gently with her heartbeat. She smiled, and the warmth of her gaze was unlike anything Ethan had felt from a human before. She inclined her head in greeting, her voice musical and soothing. Dr. Vale, we are pleased you have arrived. Please come forward. Ethan bowed awkwardly, suddenly conscious of his clumsy human movements. Your Majesty, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. It is an honor. Leora gestured toward a seat beside her. I will not keep you standing. You have traveled far, and I understand the journey has been unique. Ethan sank into the seat. The room seemed to shift slightly as he did, as if the walls themselves were breathing. Light cascaded in soft patterns across the floor. Ethan had seen alien architecture designed to impress or intimidate, but this room felt alive, warm, and inviting. It was calming, yet it heightened his awareness in ways he could not explain. I am here for the test, Ethan said cautiously. I am willing to help however I can. Queen Leora's smile widened slightly, though her eyes retained their serene composure. You are aware that no human has ever participated in this particular evaluation, she said. It is rare. Some would say it is unprecedented. Ethan swallowed. I understand, but I must admit I am unsure of what is expected. Leora's gaze softened. This is not a test of intelligence, strength, or diplomacy. It is a test of connection, of trust, of the ability to understand another being's heart when words are insufficient. She paused, letting her words settle. You are to interact with my child, Kale. Kale has never met a human. How you approach this meeting will determine much about your potential for collaboration with the Lumari. Ethan blinked. His mind raced. Your child? He repeated, unsure if he had heard correctly. You mean, like personally? Yes, Leora said. Kyle is sensitive, curious, and highly perceptive. The child will respond not to commands or instructions, but to empathy, patience, and understanding. That is what this test measures. Ethan felt a mix of awe and apprehension. He had studied alien behavior for years, had observed complex social interactions among species, and had even advised on interstellar diplomacy. But this was unlike anything he had imagined. It was personal, delicate, and beyond the realm of standard science. It required intuition, compassion, and an ability to truly connect. He nodded slowly. I understand. I will do my best. Queen Leora's light patterns pulsed gently, a sign of her approval. Your willingness is the first step. Come, I will take you to Kale, but remember, this is not about rushing or achieving a goal. Observe, listen, and feel. The child will reveal the path if you are patient. Ethan followed her through another set of softly glowing corridors. The palace felt endless, yet each step seemed natural, guided. Eventually, They arrived at a door that shimmered slightly as if it were made of liquid light. Leora touched it with a delicate finger and it parted, revealing a room filled with floating orbs, gentle music, and plants that hovered mid-air, their leaves reflecting soft glows of color. Kale was there. The child's form was smaller than Ethan expected, lithe and almost ethereal. Their skin radiated a soft, pale light and their eyes were enormous, reflecting colors that Ethan couldn't name. Kale was sitting alone, hugging a luminescent sphere, and looked up with cautious curiosity. Ethan froze for a moment, unsure how to proceed. Queen Leora placed a hand on his shoulder. "Do not approach too quickly," she advised. "Kale must choose to engage. Respect will be recognized." He nodded, taking a careful step forward. Kale's gaze shifted, watching every movement. Ethan spoke softly. "Hello, Kale. My name is Ethan. I've come a long way to meet you." The child tilted their head, studying him. There was no fear, but no immediate trust either. Kale's movements were subtle, a flick of a hand, a gentle adjustment of the sphere they held. But Ethan noticed that these gestures were deliberate, signals of observation rather than avoidance. Ethan sat down slowly, careful to remain calm and unthreatening. He tried offering a small gift, a smooth, translucent crystal from his pocket that emitted a faint glow. Kale's eyes widened slightly, but they didn't reach for it immediately. Ethan held it out, waiting, not pressing, not urging. Minutes passed. Kale's gaze softened slightly. Finally, the child extended a hand, hovering just above the crystal. Ethan held it steady, silent, letting Kale decide. Slowly, with careful movements, Kale touched the crystal. It pulsed gently, reflecting a small smile from the child. Ethan felt a surge of relief. The first step had been taken. It was small, subtle, but it mattered. Kale had recognized him not as an intruder, but as a potential companion. Queen Leora watched silently, her light patterns pulsing in a rhythm Ethan could not yet interpret. "Patience and observation are your allies," she said softly. "The test begins with a single connection. That is all that is required at first." Ethan nodded, taking a deep breath. He realized that he had underestimated the challenge. Comforting Kyle would require more than gestures or words. It would demand genuine empathy, careful attention, and a willingness to enter a world utterly unlike his own. But for the first time, he also felt something else: hope. The potential to bridge the gap between species, to create understanding, and to prove that humanity had strengths beyond technology or strength. He sat quietly, letting the child explore the crystal, letting Kale adjust to his presence. The room pulsed with calm energy, a rhythm of light and life that seemed to respond to every subtle interaction. Ethan realized that this moment, small as it was, could define the future of human-Lumari relations. One connection, one gesture, one moment of trust. That was all it would take to begin a journey neither he nor Kale could yet imagine. And as he watched Kale's eyes light with curiosity, Ethan felt the first stirrings of a bond that might transcend species, distance, and even time. The real test, he knew, was only just beginning. Ethan woke early that Lumari morning. The palace was quiet, yet alive in ways humans rarely noticed. Soft currents of light drifted through the hallways, and gentle hums of unseen energy filled the air. He had barely slept, thinking about Kale and the unusual challenge that awaited him. Comforting a child might seem simple on Earth, but Kale was unlike any child he had ever encountered. The test was more than just interaction. It was about connection, understanding, and patience. When he entered Kale's room, the child was already awake. Hovering orbs illuminated the space, casting dancing shadows that seemed to invite curiosity. Kale sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by plants that glowed in soft colors, their leaves slowly turning as if breathing. The child's eyes immediately met Ethan's. For a moment, the room felt silent, almost sacred, as if holding its breath in anticipation. "Good morning, Kale," Ethan said softly. His voice seemed unusually loud in the quiet room. "Did you sleep well?" Kale tilted their head but did not respond in words. Instead, the child's hands moved in small gestures, tracing patterns in the air. Ethan realized quickly that these gestures were not random. They were forms of expression, a language of movement he had to learn. He knelt on the floor, careful not to appear imposing. "I see you like the lights," he said, pointing to one of the floating orbs. "They're beautiful, aren't they?" Kale's eyes lit up with curiosity, but the child remained still. Ethan decided to try a different approach. He reached into his pocket and took out a small device he often used in his research, a projector that created tiny, moving images of natural scenes. Carefully, he activated it, and a miniature waterfall appeared in the air between them, complete with floating mist and the sound of flowing water. Cale gasped softly, a sound Ethan interpreted as delight. Slowly, the child reached toward the projection, tracing the patterns of the water with small, delicate fingers. Ethan smiled. This was progress. Cale was responding, not to words, but to experience, interaction, and curiosity. Over the next few hours, Ethan experimented with simple gestures. He mirrored Cale's movements, allowed the child to lead, and avoided rushing. Sometimes Cale would pull back, retreating into a corner or clutching one of the floating orbs tightly. Ethan learned that patience was essential. Pushing too hard could break trust, but gentle attention could slowly build it. At one point, Cale drifted toward a hovering garden of flowers, each petal shimmering like liquid light. The child's small hands hovered over the blooms, and Ethan noticed subtle changes in color and rhythm as Cale interacted. The flowers responded to Kyle's touch, moving and glowing in patterns that seemed almost musical. Ethan realized that the Lumari child communicated through interaction with the environment as much as with gestures or expressions. Ethan knelt beside Cale, careful not to startle. "These flowers are amazing," he said softly. "It's like they are dancing when you touch them." Cale's eyes met his, and for the first time a small smile appeared. It was fleeting but genuine. The child mimicked Ethan's movements, reaching toward a flower and tilting their head in curiosity. This moment of imitation, small as it was, felt like a breakthrough. Ethan understood that Cale was testing him, learning from him, and slowly allowing trust to grow. The hours passed quickly. Ethan discovered that humor, even simple gestures, could help. He tilted his head like the floating orbs above them, making them wobble gently with his motion. Cale giggled softly, a sound like chiming crystal, and repeated the gesture. The child's laughter was musical, bright, and contagious. Ethan felt a warmth in his chest that surprised him. He had been trained to observe, analyze, and record, but this interaction went beyond science. It was about connection. By midday, Ethan noticed a change in Cale. The child began initiating interactions, offering gestures for Ethan to mirror, and even sharing small objects like glowing crystals and musical plants. Each offering was a form of communication, a way to test whether Ethan understood. And he did, sometimes immediately, sometimes after a careful pause. Every time he responded correctly, Cale's small gestures shifted slightly, a sign of approval, and Ethan felt a quiet triumph. During one pause, Ethan asked gently, "Cale, would you like to show me something special?" The child's eyes sparkled with curiosity. Slowly, Cale led him to a corner of the room where a small gravity pool shimmered. The pool floated in midair, and its surface rippled with colors that changed according to movement. Cale dipped a hand into the water, creating luminous waves that expanded and contracted in hypnotic patterns. Ethan followed suit, dipping his own hand carefully. For several minutes, they explored the pool together, creating patterns, laughing softly, and learning each other's rhythm. Ethan realized something important. The test was not about completing a task or achieving a goal. It was about learning to move together, to respond without words, to communicate through shared experience. Later, Cale seemed to grow tired. The child curled up with a glowing orb, holding it close like a comfort object. Ethan sat nearby, not touching, not speaking, simply remaining present. Time passed slowly, and Cale gradually relaxed, leaning slightly toward him. Ethan felt a quiet joy. The child had chosen to allow him near, to accept his presence, and to trust him without coercion. Queen Leora observed from a distance through subtle monitoring crystals, remaining silent. Ethan could feel her attention, though she said nothing. He realized that every interaction, no matter how small, was being noted and evaluated. Yet he did not feel pressured. Instead, he felt encouraged to be patient, to be observant, and to act with genuine care. As the day drew to a close, Ethan and Cale sat together quietly, watching the soft pulses of light from the floating orbs. The child rested a hand briefly on Ethan's arm, a small gesture of trust and connection. It was not dramatic, not grand, but it was significant. Ethan understood that this was exactly what the Queen wanted to see, a human capable of empathy, patience and understanding across boundaries that most could not cross. Before leaving, Ethan spoke softly. "Kyle, I will come again tomorrow. I want to learn more about you and your world." The child nodded, a small glow of approval lighting Kyle's skin. It was the first sign of true recognition and comfort, a connection earned not through force or command, but through patience, observation, and respect. That night, Ethan recorded his observations in his notebook, careful to note every gesture, every subtle shift in expression, and every moment of interaction. He reflected on how different this test was from anything he had encountered. It was not about analysis or science alone. It was about the human ability to connect emotionally, intuitively, and creatively with another being. And he realized with quiet pride that this was humanity's strength, the ability to empathize, adapt, and find common ground even in worlds entirely foreign to us. Ethan lay down to sleep in his quarters that evening, thinking about Kale and the small glowing hand that had touched his arm. The day had been exhausting yet exhilarating. He understood that the test was far from over. Kale would continue to challenge him in ways subtle and unexpected, and every interaction would shape not only the child's trust, but the future of human-Lumari relations. Yet Ethan felt ready. He had seen the potential for connection, for understanding, and for friendship. And he had begun to see that humans had unique strengths that could shine in even the most alien environments. It was a quiet kind of heroism, not in battle, not in conquest, but in empathy, patience, and the courage to open one's heart. As he drifted to sleep, the soft hum of the palace and the gentle glow of distant lights reminded him that this was only the beginning. The real journey lay ahead, in the shared moments with Kale, in the discoveries yet to come, and in the challenge of proving that humanity's greatest power might not be strength or intelligence, but heart. And for the first time since his arrival, Ethan felt a deep, steady excitement, not for achievement, but for connection. The next morning, Ethan returned to Kale's room with a sense of anticipation. He had spent the night reviewing his notes and reflecting on the small victories of the previous day, the shared laughter, the gentle touch, and the quiet connection that had begun to form. Today promised new challenges, though he did not yet know what they would be. As he entered, Kale was already moving among the floating orbs, their hands guiding patterns of light across the room. The child paused as he entered, eyes bright and curious. For the first time, Kale seemed ready to lead, not merely observe. Ethan smiled and knelt on the floor, allowing Kale the space to direct the day's activities. Kale floated slightly, a soft hum accompanying their motion. The child's first test was subtle but telling. Ethan noticed that Kale seemed to rearrange the orbs in a pattern, creating a small path leading to a corner of the room he had not yet explored. He realized that Kale wanted him to follow, not with words but through observation and attention to cues. He moved carefully, matching his pace to the child's, and felt a surge of understanding. This was more than play. It was a lesson in trust and cooperation. At the corner, Kale revealed a series of floating platforms, each one hovering at a different height. The child gestured toward the platforms, indicating that Ethan should step from one to the next. The first instinct was caution. Humans were not built to navigate such shifting mid-air terrain. Yet Ethan remembered Queen Leora's words: patience, empathy, and observation. He observed Kale's movements closely, noting how the child adjusted weight and balance. Then slowly he placed his foot on the first platform. It was stable, though it shifted slightly under his weight. Kale's glowing skin pulsed with approval, and the child bounced lightly onto the next platform. Ethan followed one careful step at a time, learning to match the rhythm and grace of Kale's motion. By the time he reached the last platform, Ethan was breathing steadily, heart pounding with a mixture of exertion and triumph. Kale floated nearby, clapping their small hands together in delight. "Well done," Ethan whispered softly, feeling an unusual warmth at the shared accomplishment. Kale responded with a luminous smile, the child's trust growing with every small interaction. After the platforms, Kale led Ethan to a floating pool of liquid light, shimmering in colors he could not name. Ethan knelt at the edge, careful not to disturb the delicate surface. Kyle dipped a hand into the pool, causing waves of light to ripple outward. Ethan followed, mimicking the child's gestures. Together they created patterns, weaving light and motion in ways that seemed like a silent conversation. As they worked, Ethan realized the true nature of the test. It was not about teaching Kale or achieving a goal. It was about learning from the child, observing the subtle signals and responding with empathy and care. The Lumari had designed the test to measure his ability to connect, not through force, but through genuine attention to another being's needs and emotions. Hours passed in this quiet exchange. Kale began introducing new challenges, each one playful yet instructive. A set of floating musical instruments appeared, each producing different tones when touched. Kale demonstrated a simple melody, fingers hovering over the keys with delicate precision. Ethan watched carefully, then attempted to replicate it. His first attempts were clumsy, but Kale did not withdraw. Instead, the child's eyes sparkled, offering silent encouragement. With patience and repeated attempts, Ethan improved, eventually creating a simple harmony alongside Kale. It was a small triumph, but it carried weight. Ethan recognized that humans, through creativity, adaptability, and empathy, could bridge gaps in communication that no amount of technology or intelligence alone could achieve. He also noticed how Kale's trust deepened with each shared experience. The child was beginning to see him not as an outsider, but as a companion. During a brief pause, Ethan spoke softly. "Kale, do you like these games?" The child tilted their head, then nodded, a faint glow spreading across their skin. It was the first time Kale had responded to a direct question, indicating a growing comfort with conversation, even if it was still largely nonverbal. Ethan felt a quiet pride. Later, Kale led him to another part of the room where the walls seemed alive with moving patterns of light. Ethan recognized this as a puzzle of sorts. Shapes shifted and rearranged themselves, and Kale's gestures indicated that Ethan should help solve them. It was not a puzzle in the human sense. It did not have a single correct answer. Instead, the challenge lay in perception, cooperation, and creativity. Ethan observed the patterns, noticing how Kale's gestures guided him subtly. He mirrored the child's movements, aligning shapes and adding small variations that complemented Kale's design. The light responded instantly, pulsating and flowing in new ways. Kale's laughter filled the room, a sound like soft chimes, and Ethan laughed too, realizing that this was as much about shared joy as it was about solving a puzzle. As the day progressed, Ethan began to understand that each activity Kale introduced was designed to measure not skill or intelligence, but how he adapted to emotional and environmental cues. Kale tested patience, attention, creativity, and empathy. The child was teaching him a new way of interacting with the world, one where observation, understanding, and gentle response mattered more than command or instruction. By late afternoon, Ethan and Kyle rested near a small glowing garden. Ethan watched the child's movements carefully, noticing how subtle changes in posture, color, and glow reflected Kale's moods. Sometimes the child pulsed with excitement, sometimes dimmed in contemplation. Ethan learned to respond accordingly, soft words, gentle movements, or quiet observation depending on the signals. Queen Leora's presence was felt rather than seen. Her monitoring crystals occasionally reflected faint light patterns, and Ethan sensed her attention, but it was not intrusive. It reminded him that this was not only about building a bond with Kale, but also about demonstrating humanity's capacity for connection and empathy. A moment came when Kale appeared hesitant, hovering near a floating platform that shimmered with colors unfamiliar to Ethan. The child's small hands trembled slightly, signaling uncertainty. Ethan approached slowly, keeping his voice calm and movements measured. "You can do it, Kale, I'm right here," he said softly. Kale looked at him, eyes wide with trust, and slowly stepped onto the platform. Ethan mirrored the movement, remaining close but allowing the child to lead. Step by step, they crossed the space together, the glow of the platform responding to their coordination. When they reached the other side, Kale's smile radiated warmth and relief, a clear acknowledgement of Ethan's support. Ethan realized in that moment the depth of what he had learned. Comfort, encouragement, and shared experience were as powerful as any technology or scientific knowledge. Humans had an innate ability to adapt emotionally, to offer reassurance, and to form trust across boundaries that might seem impossible. That was a kind of strength unique to their species, a strength he was beginning to see reflected in Kale's response. As the day drew to a close, Kale floated back to the glowing garden, resting against a familiar orb. Ethan knelt beside the child, careful to remain present but unobtrusive. They shared a quiet moment, watching the subtle dance of light across the room. Ethan felt a deep satisfaction, not from achievement but from the simple, profound act of connection. Cale had chosen to trust him, and that trust was the real reward. Before leaving, Ethan whispered, "Tomorrow we will explore more together. I want to learn everything you can teach me." Cale's small hand touched his arm gently, a sign of approval and comfort. It was a quiet, meaningful gesture, one that spoke louder than words. Ethan left the room with a sense of purpose. The test was ongoing and challenges would grow more complex, but he felt ready. Humanity had strengths that transcended language, biology, and even culture. Empathy, patience, creativity, and the courage to connect were not weaknesses. They were remarkable powers. And he was beginning to see them shine in a world far beyond Earth, in the glowing eyes of a Lumari child who was teaching him, and learning from him in return. As he returned to his quarters, Ethan reflected on the day. He realized that the test was not only about Cale or the Queen. It was about showing that humans could thrive in ways other species might not anticipate. Strength came not from force but from the heart, and in that truth he found excitement, purpose, and the quiet pride of knowing that humanity could shine in even the most alien of places. And as he drifted to sleep, the soft glow of Cale's room lingering in his mind, Ethan knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new moments of connection, and new opportunities to prove that humans, in their empathy and ingenuity, could accomplish the extraordinary, even in a world so different from their own. The morning light in the Lumari Palace was softer than Ethan had ever seen on Earth. Pale streams of glowing color drifted lazily through the halls, reflecting off the floating gardens and softly illuminating the corridors. Ethan felt a quiet excitement as he made his way to Cale's room. Yesterday's interactions had strengthened the connection between him and the child. But today, Ethan sensed that the challenge would be different. Cale seemed to possess a subtle sense of anticipation, a knowing glimmer in their large, expressive eyes. As he entered, Cale was waiting near a small cluster of bioluminescent plants. Their delicate leaves shimmered with changing colors, and the floating orbs around them rotated slowly in patterns that seemed almost musical. Cale's eyes lit up at Ethan's arrival, and for a brief moment the room felt as though it were breathing in tandem with them. The child did not speak, yet the air carried a sense of expectation. Cale extended a hand toward Ethan, and the gesture was unlike anything he had seen before. It was not an invitation to follow, nor a playful request, but a silent signal. The child wanted Ethan to participate in something more personal, something that would require not just attention, but emotional insight. Ethan nodded, accepting the challenge. He stepped carefully into the space, ensuring that every movement conveyed calmness, patience, and openness. Cale led him to a small, floating platform near the center of the room. The platform shimmered softly, reflecting colors that shifted in response to their movements. Cale gestured for Ethan to sit, and he complied, feeling the subtle energy of the platform beneath him. For a few moments they simply observed each other, eyes meeting in a quiet exchange. Ethan realized that this moment itself was part of the test. Patience, presence, and understanding without the distraction of activity. After several minutes, Cale reached for a glowing orb and held it gently. The orb pulsed, responding to the child's touch, and Ethan watched carefully. Slowly, Cale placed the orb between them, a silent invitation to share the experience. Ethan extended his hand, allowing his fingers to hover above the orb without pressing too hard. The orb glowed brighter at his touch, reflecting a sense of mutual trust. Cale's small smile, fleeting yet genuine, confirmed that he was following the right approach. Ethan realized that the true purpose of today's challenge was emotional resonance. It was not about completing tasks or solving puzzles. It was about attuning himself to Cale's feelings, mirroring the child's subtle cues, and responding with empathy. He focused on remaining calm, patient, and observant, letting the flow of communication between them unfold naturally. Cale's next gesture was more complex. The child guided Ethan to a series of floating panels, each displaying images that shifted and changed with the light. Some images were bright and joyful, others more somber, and a few depicted abstract shapes that seemed to convey emotion through color and movement. Cale gestured for Ethan to interact with the images, to touch them, and to respond intuitively. Ethan hesitated briefly, unsure of how to approach the abstract displays. Then he remembered the lessons of the past days: patience, observation, and empathy. He reached out, touching one panel, and felt a subtle warmth radiate from it. Kale's glowing skin brightened slightly, and the child's eyes focused intently on his response. Ethan experimented, gently tracing the shapes, following the flow of light and responding to the subtle shifts in color. Each interaction elicited a response from Kale, sometimes a flicker of light, sometimes a soft hum of delight, sometimes a quiet reflection. Hours passed as Ethan engaged with the panels, learning to interpret and respond to Kale's subtle signals. The child's trust grew steadily, and with it, a deepening sense of connection. Ethan realized that humans possessed a unique ability to interpret emotion, to read subtle cues, and to respond with compassion, even across species. The test was revealing that human empathy was a kind of intelligence, one that could bridge gaps no technology or logic alone could overcome. After the panels, Kale guided Ethan to a corner of the room where a floating mirror hovered. Unlike ordinary mirrors, this one reflected not appearances but emotions. Ethan could see subtle glows and waves emanating from both himself and Kale, representing feelings, moods, and intentions. Kale extended a hand, inviting him to engage with the mirror. Ethan studied the reflections carefully. He saw fear, curiosity, joy, and hesitation in Kale's aura. He responded by calming his own presence, breathing steadily and sending quiet reassurance through his gestures. Gradually, the child's reflection softened, the colors brightening and flowing in harmony with his own. Kale's small hand touched his briefly, a silent acknowledgement of his understanding. Ethan felt a warmth in his chest, a profound sense of accomplishment that went beyond words. Later, Kale introduced another subtle test. The child retreated briefly to a corner of the room, appearing unsure or perhaps shy. Ethan waited, remembering the lessons of patience. Instead of approaching directly, he observed Kale's movements, the subtle shifts in glow and posture, and mirrored the child's breathing rhythm. Slowly, Kale moved closer, sensing Ethan's attentiveness and calm. When the child finally reached out, it was with a genuine willingness to connect, not out of obligation or expectation. The day continued with small, quiet exercises designed to foster trust. Kale led Ethan through floating gardens where delicate plants responded to touch and emotion. Each interaction required careful observation, gentle movement, and the ability to respond intuitively to the child's subtle cues. Ethan learned to communicate without words, to convey reassurance and understanding through presence, movement, and attention. During a quiet moment, Kale placed a small glowing crystal in Ethan's hand. The child's eyes were wide, expectant, and filled with a subtle intensity that conveyed both curiosity and challenge. Ethan held the crystal carefully, noticing the faint warmth emanating from it. He mirrored Kale's gentle movements, aligning his gestures with the child's, and the crystal glowed brighter, as if responding to their shared harmony. Kale's small smile confirmed the success of the interaction, and Ethan felt a quiet joy. As the sun, or its Lumari equivalent, began to dip in the sky, Kale guided Ethan to a floating platform near the center of the room. Here the child demonstrated a soft melody, created with the glowing orbs. Ethan listened carefully, noticing how the melody shifted with Kale's mood and intention. He attempted to mimic the sounds, initially clumsy but gradually improving through observation and practice. The child's eyes brightened, their glow reflecting delight and approval. Together they created a simple harmony, a small symphony of trust and connection. By the end of the day, Ethan realized that the test had moved beyond playful exercises. Kale's challenges were designed to probe the deeper aspects of human empathy: attentiveness, patience, adaptability, and the ability to communicate without words. Each interaction was a step toward mutual understanding, and each small success strengthened the bond between them. Before leaving, Ethan knelt beside Kale, speaking softly. "You have taught me so much today. I feel like I am learning your world, and I hope I am helping you feel safe with me too." Kyle's small hand rested briefly on his arm, a gesture of trust and comfort. It was a quiet moment, yet powerful. Ethan understood that this was the real reward of the test. Not recognition, not achievement, but the formation of genuine connection. As he returned to his quarters, Ethan reflected on the lessons of the day. He had come to the Lumari Palace expecting to demonstrate knowledge, intelligence, and skill. Instead, he had discovered something far more valuable: the ability of humans to connect across boundaries, to empathize, and to build trust through patience, observation, and care. The child had tested him in subtle ways, revealing that true strength lay in emotional intelligence and compassion. That evening, as Ethan prepared for sleep, he thought of Kale and the floating crystals, the glowing orbs and the melodies they had shared. He realized that humanity's greatest strength was not physical power or technological advancement, but the ability to understand, comfort, and connect. It was a strength that could shine even in worlds far beyond Earth. In the glowing eyes of a Lumari child who had taught him more than any textbook or laboratory ever could. And as he closed his eyes, Ethan felt a quiet confidence. Tomorrow would bring new tests, new challenges, and new opportunities to deepen his bond with Kyle. But for the first time, he felt truly prepared, not through knowledge alone, but through the quiet, steady power of empathy, patience, and connection. The morning air in the Lumari Palace was calm and soft, carrying a gentle shimmer of light across the corridors. Ethan felt a mixture of anticipation and quiet excitement as he made his way to Kale's room. Over the past days, he had grown to understand the rhythms of the child's behavior, the subtle gestures, the quiet signals, and the unique ways Kale expressed curiosity, trust, and emotion. Today, however, he sensed that something different awaited him. Kale's eyes, wide and glowing, reflected a sense of expectation that Ethan had not yet fully encountered. As he entered, Kale was sitting near the floating garden, hands lightly touching the luminous plants. The child's skin pulsed with soft colors, reflecting mood and focus. For the first time, Kale did not immediately approach or invite Ethan to play. Instead, the child remained still, observing him with intensity and curiosity. Ethan understood immediately. This was the culmination of the test. The Queen's challenge was about more than patience, creativity, or empathy. It was about achieving a deep mutual understanding. Ethan knelt quietly, ensuring his presence was calm and non-threatening. "Good morning, Kale," he said softly. "I'm here, and I am ready to learn from you today." The child's gaze shifted and a small flicker of a smile appeared. It was subtle, yet it carried weight. Kale extended a hand toward a glowing orb nearby, signaling the start of today's challenge. The orb floated gently, spinning slowly. When Ethan reached out, Kale placed a hand over his, guiding the motion. The orb glowed brighter, responding to the harmony between their movements. Ethan realized that the final challenge was not a puzzle or a game. It was a test of presence and shared emotion, a demonstration that he could match the child's rhythm, understand the nuances of feeling, and respond with genuine care. Kale led him to the center of the room, where a small platform hovered mid-air, surrounded by soft streams of light. This is it, Ethan thought. The final part. He remembered the lessons of the previous days: patience, observation, creativity, and empathy. But now the stakes felt higher. Kale's trust was fragile, and the child's reactions were subtle but telling. One wrong movement could break the connection, but one right gesture could solidify it. Kale demonstrated a small sequence of gestures, a combination of movement, touch, and light manipulation. Ethan watched carefully, internalizing each motion. Slowly he mirrored the gestures, aligning his rhythm with Kale's. The orb between them responded, pulsing brightly in time with their coordination. Kale's skin glowed warmly, signaling approval. It was the first moment Ethan truly felt that he was communicating directly, not through words but through shared understanding. Then Kale did something unexpected. The child stepped back slightly, hesitating, and Ethan noticed a subtle dimming of the glow that reflected uncertainty. Ethan understood immediately. Kale was testing his patience and emotional sensitivity one final time. He did not move closer or speak too loudly. Instead, he stayed calm, mirrored Kale's breathing, and allowed the child to decide the next step. Gradually, Kale extended a small hand toward Ethan's shoulder, a gesture of tentative trust. Ethan responded gently, letting the child's guidance dictate the interaction. The moment was quiet, delicate yet filled with profound meaning. Kale's smile grew, the glow returning to full strength, and Ethan felt a surge of satisfaction. The child had chosen to connect fully, and that choice reflected more than comfort. It reflected trust, recognition, and understanding. Cale led Ethan to a small mirror-like surface that reflected not appearances but emotions. Ethan could see their combined presence, a dance of light and feeling that intertwined with every gesture. He observed the mirror, noting the harmony between their emotions, and understood the final lesson. True connection was about resonance, attunement, and shared presence. It was not about controlling or directing, but about meeting another being where they were, heart to heart. With careful movements, Ethan guided a small light pattern in the mirror, mirroring Cale's gestures and responding to the child's subtle changes in intensity. The reflection pulsed with a soft brilliance, signaling the deepening of their connection. Cale's hands rested lightly on Ethan's arm, confirming that the child felt safe, understood, and valued. It was a quiet, powerful triumph, one that no words could fully describe. Queen Leora appeared at the edge of the room, her luminous presence calm and serene. Ethan noticed her gentle smile, and he understood that the test was complete. Cale had chosen to trust him fully, and he had responded with patience, care, and genuine empathy. The child's glow radiated warmth. The room itself seemed to shimmer in approval, and Ethan felt a quiet pride in humanity's unique strength, the ability to connect, understand, and comfort across boundaries that might seem impossible. "Dr. Vale," the Queen said softly, her voice like a gentle melody, "you have completed the challenge, and you have done so with patience, attentiveness, and respect. Cale's trust is the highest recognition you can receive." Ethan bowed slightly, humbled. "Your Majesty, it has been an honor. Cale has taught me more than I ever imagined possible." The Queen's gaze softened. Indeed, the test was never merely about Cale. It was about understanding what humans bring to the universe. Empathy, creativity, and the ability to bridge differences. You have shown that humanity's strength lies not in force or dominance, but in heart and understanding. Ethan felt a deep satisfaction. All the years of study, observation, and preparation had led to this moment. But more than that, he realized that humanity's potential was not limited to science or technology. Humans had an innate ability to connect with others, to comfort and to understand emotions across any barrier. That was a gift that could shape alliances, friendships, and entire civilizations. Cale floated closer, eyes wide and glowing with curiosity. The child handed Ethan a small glowing crystal, a symbol, Ethan realized, of trust and connection. He accepted it gently, feeling its warmth and significance. Cale's smile was bright, radiant, and filled with subtle joy. In that moment, Ethan understood that the child had chosen him not only as a companion, but as a friend. The Queen stepped closer. "Dr. Vale, I invite you to work with the Lumari in future endeavors. Your ability to connect, to empathize, and to learn from Cale demonstrates that humans have a unique role in the galaxy. We hope to collaborate, learn, and grow together." Ethan's heart swelled with gratitude and humility. "I would be honored, Your Majesty," he said. He glanced at Cale, who mirrored his smile, and he felt a quiet certainty that this was only the beginning of a profound friendship and partnership. As the day ended, Ethan reflected on everything that had transpired. The test had been challenging, subtle, and at times exhausting, but it had revealed something extraordinary. Humanity's greatest strength was not in tools, weapons, or advanced technology. It was in empathy, patience, creativity, and the ability to connect deeply with others. That strength had carried him through Cale's tests and had allowed him to form a bond that transcended species, culture, and distance. Ethan sat quietly in his quarters that evening, holding the small crystal Cale had given him. He thought of the floating gardens, the pools of light, the musical orbs, and the delicate mirror of emotions. Each moment had been a lesson, a challenge, and a reward all at once. He realized that what the Queen had asked of him was not simply to comfort a child, but to demonstrate that humans could offer something extraordinary in the galaxy, the ability to understand, care, and connect across any boundary. He thought of Cale's glowing eyes, the small hand resting briefly on his arm, and the shared laughter that had echoed in the palace. Those memories were vivid, a reminder that connection required attention, patience, and heart. The child had taught him as much as he had taught Cale, and in that reciprocity lay the true beauty of the test. As Ethan drifted into sleep, he felt a quiet pride and excitement. The test was complete, but the journey was only beginning. Humanity had much to offer, not through domination or technology, but through the very qualities that had allowed him to connect with Kale: empathy, patience, understanding, and creativity. The next morning, he would continue to explore the palace, to learn from Kale, and to share what he had learned with the Lumari. But tonight he allowed himself a moment of peace, knowing that he had passed the Queen's test, not by proving skill or intellect, but by demonstrating the quiet, profound power of the human heart. And as he held the glowing crystal, feeling its warmth in his hand, Ethan knew that this experience would shape him forever. Humanity had a place among the stars, not just through achievement, but through the very essence of what made humans unique: their ability to care, to connect, and to comfort even in worlds far beyond their own. The palace was quiet, yet alive, and Ethan felt a deep, steady certainty. This was not an ending, it was a beginning of friendship, understanding, and the recognition that humanity's true power lay not in force or dominance, but in heart. Kale's gentle smile, Queen Leora's approving gaze, and the quiet harmony of the floating gardens were proof enough. Humanity had passed the test, not by conquering or competing, but by connecting, and that, Ethan knew, was the most extraordinary achievement of all.